In terms of growing the company, we're faced with a lot of different challenges. And how do we make our company more valuable? And what are some ways that we can truly get into a situation where we can get tax advantages, we can maintain control of the company, and we also can have ownership of the company shared with our employees? Dennis, you know the answer.
It's a very appealing, and I mean we've had guests on talking about selling your business, but
Hmm.
this is a different one today that I think is something most of us probably don't know much about, and that it's one where it's worth listening to, and hopefully you'll reach out to our guest and ask some questions because I think this is pretty powerful. It's got me thinking for sure.
Yeah. We're talking about employee stock ownership plans and ESOPs, as they're called. I worked for a company decades ago that did have that, and I participated, but I had no idea what it was. I just knew that I could get ownership of the company, and I was participating in it. And when I left the company, I got some money, and that was great. That was a wonderful thing. Made me feel like I had contributed something beyond just my expertise, and I had gotten something in return. This is a really interesting thing. I thought this was only for big companies, Dennis, but
Yeah, no, and I mean, and we've all heard of 401ks and stuff, but this
mhm,
is different than a 401k.
yeah, it
Um,
really is.
and so you know, I think it gets my wheels spinning in my head of, okay, how could this be applied to my business? How could it be applied to some of my clients? Because I think, and as we listen to Matt talk, most of us want to give back to the community. And I think this ESOP approach is something really powerful because as a business owner, one of your biggest concerns is when you sell it, what happens to it? What happens to your employees? And
Mhm.
this actually gives some protection to those things.
Yeah. So today we have Matt Middendorp, who is a director over at Vision Point Capital. He's going to give us a little bit of insight in terms of how these program works, what you need to be able to qualify for it, and really the process and the pros and the cons of the program. This is a really interesting discussion for those of us who are thinking about ways of being able to grow our company and do something beyond the ordinary. I think this is worth a listen to.
WFH with two guys. Now here's Benny and Dennis.
One of the things, Dennis, that I have heard of is that as a company starts growing and we want to really turn into the higher quality company or be recognized by other people, yeah, we want to start being able to do something different, something that typically small businesses can't or won't offer. And that's ESOP, or employee stock ownership programs. This is something that I have to say, I don't know much about this topic. Maybe you do, Dennis.
I,
Are you familiar with
I'm
this?
not real familiar. I think maybe way back when I was at a company that had it or something, but I don't remember it because I was so young and it didn't mean it
Yeah.
went over my head. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think, this is something, it's a topic that probably all of us could learn a lot about and maybe apply it to
Yeah.
our business.
Yeah. So today we do have that expert and someone who can let us know little bit about this. But Matt, thank you for coming on the show today. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Benny. Thank you, Dennis, for having me on. It
Yeah.
sounds like I can shed some light and maybe Dennis jog your memory a little bit.
Exactly. I mean, so not only do we do these podcasts for the listeners, it's also for Benny and I to learn new things. So I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
this conversation.
Awesome.
Yeah. So Matt, just let's get straight into it. Can you tell us what is an ESOP? What does that mean?
Sure. So, very simply, an ESOP is an employee stock ownership plan. And what happens in an ESOP transaction, it is a way for businesses to transition. Now, I want to be clear, transitioning out is an option if you want to sell your business and move on to bigger and better things. But I also work with a lot of companies that are looking to do partial sales or looking to transition up too. So we're going to get in obviously into what that really means. But in an ESOP transaction, what happens is an ESOP trust is created and the company is sold to the ESOP trust, however much of the company you want to sell, whether it's all of it or partial. And I want to be clear about a couple of things. What does that mean? It means that Yes, the ownership of the company transitions to the trust, whatever percentage that is. But what it does not mean, it does not mean that the employees get control, right? The employees are beneficiary owners. So the seller gets paid, they get to pull their liquidity out of the business. The business is better off for becoming an ESOP due to some tax rules that we'll talk about. The employees build wealth, but they aren't involved then. They're beneficiary share owners. So they aren't changing the name of the company, hiring and firing. The control of the company stays with the people who run it in the day to day. So what I always like to say is selling the company to an ESOP is the only business transition, whether it's up or out, where the people in control of the company stay in control of it. May look a little different, but they run it.
So Matt, from an employee's perspective, it's like buying stock kind of, right? I mean, like I own stock in companies. I don't get to make decisions in those companies, but I get the benefit of the profits that they make and what they share to the shareholders. So is that kind of a easy way to think of it?
That's an easy way to think of it, except if you're an employee, you're not putting your own money into it.
Right, exactly.
Right. And the benefit of it is for the first time, the financial incentive of the company is perfectly aligned with the financial incentives of the employees.
Right. So instead,
right, like you said,
instead of doing a
the
bunch of
company
goals,
does well, the employees do well.
Yeah, instead of doing a bunch of goals and hoping they understand it, now they actually own and have input to the bottom line of what's going to happen in their behaviors and their actions of the things that they can control.
And a big thing that happens in successful ESOP companies is those employees know how they impact the bottom line and directly see the benefit of it. It's a beautiful system.
Interesting.
I see a huge benefit here where, as an employee, if I don't have an ownership stake in the company, then I really don't care too much other than drawing a salary from the company. And, anything after the door closes behind me at 5 o'clock, it's out of my life. But if I have shares of the company, if I have that, then that's directly correlated. And as an employer, I want my company, my employees to be vested in that and really take that ownership stake. And this is really that's what I'm hearing, is that this is what this is.
Well, and it's pretty remarkable from an employee's point of view. And this also obviously benefits the company too, right? But a typical ESOP employee stays at a company 4 times longer than a non-ESOP employee would. Right? An ESOP employee has a 92% greater median household wealth than non-ESOP employees, right? So we hear all the time about people don't have enough money for retirement in the US, that there's a very small part of the workforce that actually has the money set aside to step away from their jobs when they reach a certain point in their life. Man, a lot of those people are ESOP employees. And if I'm an employee and I'm saying, man, I'm building this wealth, I love working here, I see the financial benefit to the things I do every day, I can see why there's a lot of reasons to stay.
So if I heard you correctly too, as well, by having that type of that wealth accumulation capability, it sounds like to me you would be probably attracting a higher quality of employee. You're not really just going to get maybe somebody who can kind of check the boxes. There's going to be a little bit more of an intangible that I'm kind of hearing here.
A lot of companies I help make this transition, one of the challenges they're trying to solve is hiring and retaining better talent.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
Now, in terms of how this looks, back in the day, I remember when I was employees of a company, we had stock options. This is different than that, isn't it?
Yeah, this is very different. So and there's a whole system behind it, but yeah, stock options and employee stock ownership plans are different. In the way that an employee stock ownership plan is a qualified retirement plan, kind of like a 401k. It's under that same set of rules and that same set of laws. But unlike a 401k, where you have to put your own money in, you make the investment. In an ESOP plan, you, just because you work there, are part of the ESOP and gain the shares. You don't have to put your own cash into it. Now, that being said, you are investing your time, talents, and expertise to the success of the company, probably at a higher level because you're an ESOP, but you aren't making a financial investment as an employee.
So what's the benefits to the employer? So we talked about the employee and that kind of stuff. We know about, hey, you may hire better talent, but I'm assuming there's some other benefits to the employer.
Sure. If you don't mind, let's talk about the benefits to the seller and the employer.
Okay.
Right. To the seller and the business. So from a seller's point of view, right? So let's talk about the business owner who's thinking about what's next. Looking at ESOP means a couple of different things, right? For some business owners, it's about pulling liquidity out of the business. I have a client, they're a pool company. They transitioned to ESOP. The 4 owners are in their 40s. They're not going anywhere, but they were thinking about what's next for them, what's next for their business. They pulled the liquidity out of the business and they invested it in other places, in other projects that they're passionate about, but they're still very much a part of their business. For some sellers, it's about cashing in, for lack of a better way to put it, right? They've built this thing, they've taken on the risk, they've put the time in, and they're looking to transition out into the next phase of their lives. That's awesome. You know what? You built this thing, you took on the risk, you deserve to get paid for it. The cool thing about ESOP, though, is it's the only tool where you can transition up or transition out where you stay in control of what happens. When you sell to, let's just say, private equity or a third party, most of the time the sellers stay in the business, but they're no longer controlling what happens in the day to day. They're not controlling if the profits stay in town. And for a lot of people looking at ESOP, they really do want to take care of their employees that helped them get there. They are quite often the types of businesses that have their names on the scoreboard at the high school football field or in the gym, right? So they want the profits to stay in town too as they transition. They don't want things to just leave. So it's about legacy. It's about return. I want to stress that with an ESOP, you don't have to sacrifice return. We find that quite often the after-tax return of an ESOP sale is better than private equity or third party. You don't have to give something up to give back.
Interesting.
Which is pretty neat, right? So from a seller's point of view, you're in control. You're keeping your legacy intact for this thing that you built, and you're getting to take care of the people that you take care of, that you want to take care of. It's a pretty win-win from a seller's point of view.
So Matt, from a business size, number of employees, our revenue, what's that threshold? I mean, is there some magic number there that this works for and doesn't work for others?
Yeah. So let's talk about the business, right? Typical ESOP business is US based. There are Canadian and UK and other country versions of it, but from my point of view, we're talking about American US based businesses, typically 15 to 20 employees. Must be an S Corp or C Corp. And if you're not, you need to be able to convert to one. And the thing about this is an ESOP, I get people that call me all the time that they can't sell their business any other way. So they're thinking about ESOP as a parachute. No, an ESOP company is a company that would be sellable no matter what, right? So you have to have a strong balance sheet. You have to have management that's aligned. You need to be a successful company. So 15 to 20 employees, US based and reasonably successful. Now, what's in it for the company to do this though? There's a couple of different things. We've already talked about retention, right? That ESOP employees stay longer at ESOP companies. ESOP companies tend to grow 2.4 to 2.5% faster than non-ESOP companies. They see a 4 to 5% return increase in productivity the year after they become an ESOP, right? So ESOP companies are very attractive. But there is one really, really big carrot that I want to throw out there. And this is going to be kind of we're going to have to pause for a minute and reflect on this. So just be prepared. Okay. So if you're an S corporation, for example, and you sell to an ESOP 100% of the company, you no longer pay state or federal taxes.
What?
Right. Now, it's proportional. So I mentioned earlier, you don't have to sell all of it. So if you sell 30% of the company, you get 30% of that tax benefit. But essentially what happens is in an S Corp, those K1s that the shareholders are getting go to the ESOP and the ESOP doesn't have to pay taxes.
Huh.
That's a
So
good one to
from
pause for and to make sure you understand that.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
that
so
can be
we should
big.
all take a
Let that
deep
sink
breath. Everybody who's driving, listening to the podcast, make sure you're still on the road. Right. So yeah, it's a very real reason because from a cash flow perspective, for a company, man, I talk to a lot of companies where the sellers want to leave, but they don't have the cash to pay them, right? They don't have the cash to pay out the owners for their shares. So they're stuck with what to do with the company. So this creates a market for those shares. You're creating a tax benefit, which is hopefully going to offset what you're paying. And in the long run, once the sellers are paid off, 5, 7 years, 10 years, whatever it is, depending on the company, that's suddenly cash flow that you can do a lot of really cool things with.
Yeah. Wow.
Mhm.
So Matt, why aren't more companies ESOPs? Because I mean, there's a lot of pros here. Is it just a lack of knowledge, or what's the reason?
Well, that's exactly it, right? So, not that I want to spend a ton of time talking about the challenges of ESOP this early, but the truth of it is one of the things about ESOP is it's not something that's talked about a lot, and the honest reason is because there's a lot of money in M&A,
Okay.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
I have never gotten a referral from an M&A guy because they make money selling businesses, not referring them to people who sell them a different way. So yeah, it's a very well kept secret. There's a cost to creating an ESOP. There's an ongoing cost to maintaining the ESOP, right? Because you've got these shares, you need an administrator just like you do for your 401k. But again, man, if you're not paying taxes, you're going to pay 30, 40, $50,000 a year to maintain the ESOP, to hire the trustee, to get the valuation done, if it's saving you hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in taxes,
Right.
right?
This is interesting, Dennis. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and there's this new term that I just heard. It's probably not a new term, but it is to me, called aqua hiring. Have you heard this? Maybe you have, Matt. But
I haven't. What is it?
so what it is you may have heard about this acquisition that Windsurf was going to be acquired by OpenAI, right? And they were going to, they're buying it for this huge number. And that deal ended up falling apart. Microsoft didn't like the way it looked, I guess. And so what happened was Google stepped in and they offered a package to the founders and the executives, but left all of the employees out of that whole prospect. So they didn't have to pay. They only paid for the executives, but they left the employees in the dust. Well, the story ends up okay, because another company by the name of Devon, and if anyone wants to fact check me on this, please just send it and put it in the comments and let me know. But Devon ended up kind of getting those people, those employees. But what it did is it set a precedent where M&A people are great for the founders and the C-levels who do have an ownership in the company, but for all the employees who maybe they're kind of putting goodwill in, and they're kind of, this promise of, hey, I'm going to, typically for startups, you're working for less money than you could if you work for, one of the big companies, right? But it ends up kind of, you end up kind of looking bad. Now, go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
Let's be clear about something though, Benny. I just want to make sure the shareholders should get paid, right? They should benefit. They should profit from the risk they took with this thing they built. Right. So there is nothing wrong with the shareholders making money. But the people I work with are also the ones that aren't just thinking about themselves.
I think this is what is an attractive thing, right? Because you're going to be having an ownership stake in this, right? And with startups, and I don't know that world very well, but my understanding is that a lot of promises are kept, and depending upon, and by the way, anyone out there who is thinking about working for a potential startup, investigate, look into the owners yourselves, and
be prepared for volatility.
Yes. It seems to me that an ESOP would quell some of this stuff. And the fact that that you're going to be, you have an ownership stake in this, and I'm going to guess, this is something that people have to qualify for. You can scale this with different compensation packages. And I'm guessing there are vesting periods too, as well. This isn't something that, you're not giving this out willy-nilly and suddenly someone owns 10% of the company and they work for a month and a half, right? So,
yep. Yeah, it's a qualified retirement plan. So like a 401k, there are vesting periods. Actually, the same rules apply. You have to be there for so long and be of a certain age to be eligible for the ESOP. Now, those rules are set by the company, but of course, the law places guardrails on exactly what that looks like. There are rules for who gets how many shares and when. One of the cool things about this, by the way, if you're a seller, there's a really good chance, depending on how you structure it, that if you stay in the company, you're going to continue to earn shares in the ESOP too, in addition to getting paid for your ownership.
Well, yeah, and we talk about the high quality and caliber of the employees that you
Hmm.
have. And if you have, let's say there's a, I don't know, let's just throw something out there. There's a 5-year vesting period, right? As an
Sure.
example. And if I've got let's say I own an engineering firm or an accounting firm, and I've got really skilled employee and maybe you never know what's going on in their lives. You never know what's going on in their heads. But if I have a vesting period that says that you're going to be getting X amount of shares at the end of this 5-year period, well, maybe they'll stick around a little bit longer. And not
Hmm.
that, you know, you don't want disgruntled or unhappy employees, but the fact is if somebody's been offered, you know, if they do good work and the competition sees them and they are involved in the ESOP program, maybe they'll think twice before making that move because what they're walking away from.
Well, it's interesting because part of the education you want to do is definitely going to be projecting, right?
Mm,
You're going to want to show them, man, if you stick around one more year, this is what your balance could be based on what we're budgeted for this year.
yeah.
And man,
Hmm.
if you stick around for 5 more years, it's this is where you're going to be. Why would you leave that on the table?
I say
Yeah.
this,
So
a
it's a
lot of this,
very powerful
a lot of
communication
this is
tool.
communication education. You don't just do an
No,
ESOP and then be quiet about it. I would think this is something
no.
you talk about, your people know
Hmm.
about, they have access to these certain milestones and those kinds of things,
Yes.
because that's the trigger that in my mind gets them excited about sticking in and also putting more effort into it, because they start seeing the true benefits and they're getting a piece of that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, like I said, there's a reason ESOP companies grow faster, see a greater return on productivity, and get a better ROI.
If you're a startup, they can't start out as an ESOP, I'm assuming. You've got to have some level of performance and results, I assume. Am I making an assumption incorrectly?
Well, I think that would be fair, right? Because while an ESOP, when you're selling to an ESOP trust, the trustee is buying future cash flows,
Hmm.
which to a certain extent you can produce, you can create projections as a startup, but man, how much credibility do they have,
Right.
right? No, I mean, past performance is an indicator of future results in some cases, at least shows a track record. And yes, as a startup, it's going to be difficult to become an ESOP. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I get calls all the time from business owners who sold something to private equity, saw what happened to their company, and went, man, they're starting the same company over again 5 years later,
Mm.
stealing their best employees, and they want to start out as an ESOP. Now it's hard, but it can be done. So I guess what I would tell people is, when you're starting up, get your feet under you, right? Create a track record. It takes a couple of years to get to profitability in a lot of cases. It takes a couple of years to really understand your business and hit it hard. Um, be patient, get to that 15 to 20 employee threshold and really create a track record of success before you start to pull liquidity out.
You know, one of the things that we talked about, obviously, from a tax advantage perspective, that's
Mhm.
obviously good. And I did want to, I think you touched on it a little bit here, but I want to expand on it. This is an opportunity, like you said, if private equity, you know, if an M&A type of situation were to be the only way out for a company, there is no guarantee that what you've built and what you've established is going to stay that way. That it's,
Mhm.
you know, people come in and I've seen companies like ripped apart and they've fired a bunch of employees and they took the best ideas and products and employees and put them in there. This really is an opportunity for you to have access to not only the tax advantages but some capital that you can keep your legacy, your mark, and your company doesn't have to really change. Am I right?
That is a great way to put it. And the awesome part about that is like you said, when you sell to a third party or private equity, the profits leave town.
Yeah.
And if you believe in your community and you're a philanthropist in your community, then man, that all the good you've done locally dries up.
Yeah.
And that's tough. It's really tough for people. Again,
Oh man.
this isn't for everyone. It is really about mindset. It's I want to get a fair return. I want my employees to be taken care of, and I want my business to be better off. And those three things don't always matter to every seller, really. And if they don't, then ESOP's not a fit. But if it is something that you like, then definitely you should explore it more.
So, Matt, as a seller, what's some of the benefits to the seller that we may not even be aware of?
Well, we talked about control. We talked about the desire that people have to benefit their employees, to benefit their community. We talked about the fact that your return isn't something you have to sacrifice as a seller, right? If you're comparing it to other ways to sell your business or transition your business, you don't have to take less. You don't have to be altruistic and give your own return away to do this. But if I would say there's one other thing about ESOP that separates it from other forms of M&A activity, is there are other tax advantages to the seller, right? So one of those things is the return is taxed differently, the money you're making. Almost every ESOP transaction has a component of seller financing, so you do earn interest as well. But the other thing worth mentioning is there are strategies that you can use. It's called a 1042 exchange, where you can actually defer taxes on the income that you're making from selling your business.
Interesting.
So you don't have to pay. Again, it's deferred, but you have a vehicle available to you, which is a whole another podcast to get into the detail on. But you have that vehicle available to you. So, man, the company, if you're 100% employee owned and you're an S corp, is no longer paying state or federal taxes, and you're deferring taxes on your return from the sale. That's pretty powerful combination. There's a lot of incentive. And oh yeah, by the way, you're creating wealth for your employees that they would have never had without you.
And you get to stay involved and you get to help your community out. I mean, it
Yeah.
sounds like a pretty big win-win for everybody involved, that if I'm a business owner, I want to learn more about ESOP, because like Benny and I, we didn't know much about it. This past 20 some
not at
minutes.
all.
I probably learned more, Matt, from you about ESOP than I ever knew. So
Yeah,
this was
for
really,
sure.
really powerful.
Yeah, and along those lines, Matt, this is such a big topic, and I know that we probably have just scratched the surface in terms of what this means, but I'm certain that there are going to be some people who have some questions that
Sure.
are interested in what this all means. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. And I want to be clear to your listeners that my job is education. That's what I do. Is we talk through your situation, what your goals are. We talk about ESOP, what it is, how it works, the process to become one, the challenges of ESOP, and decide if that fits your goals. So I just want to be clear, my job is education. And if you would like to learn more about this, I'm actually going to go out there and I'm going to go crazy and I'm going to give my personal cell phone number, if that's okay.
Yeah.
You can actually,
It's your phone.
yeah, right. Caller ID is a blessing. You can always reach me at 715-897-0879. Again, Matt Middendorf, 715-897-0879. You can also email me if you'd like at matt.middendorp@Vision Point Capital.
Middendorp for the audience out there, just in case.
Oh man, I got to spell my own last name. No, It is M as in Mary, I, D as in dog, D as in dog, E, N as in Nancy, D as in dog, O-R, P as in Paul.
Fantastic.
Can you tell I've done that once or twice?
Once or twice, yeah. Listen, hey, Matt, this is such a wonderful topic, and thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate it. This is, we love learning about new things, and this is a great topic. But thank you so much for stopping by today. I think you definitely taught me a little bit more about ESOPs.
Well, and thank you, Benny and Dennis, for the questions you asked and the energy you brought. I appreciate your enthusiasm for the topic, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Take care.
You've been listening to WFH with Two Guys. We'll see you next time.